Valorant is a tactical shooter where obviously economy, buying guns, the buy phase, everything has a ton of value and depth, right? Like knowing how to control your eco, what guns to buy, when to force buy. They're things you guys have most likely all heard of, and they're extraordinarily important. But there's always one thing, like since the start of Valorant, that's always caught me off guard, and I wonder, could it ever be fixed? And the main thing is how 90 to 95% of the guns in the game are actually never used. Now, I cross-reference between Valor buffs, Valorant tracker, Valorant stats, etc. And truth be told, the stats are wild. Just hear me out. Okay, the main thing to note is I'm using statistics in Radiant. Basically, Plat, Diamond, Immortal, and Radiant all have very similar statistics on the guns. They shift up a bit as you go into the lower ranks. For the sake of competitive discussion, I'm going to be using the Radiant stats. The first aspect is that the Vandal is overwhelmingly the top gun. I know it was always the top gun, but like the shift has been huge. I made a video about why the Phantom is dying, and it's aging very well. The total percent of kills that are had in Radiant. So the most amount of deaths in Radiant come from a Vandal at 51.8%. Insane. After that, we have the Phantom at 10%, then the Ghost at 6%, then the Spectre at 5%, then the Sheriff at 4.7%, then the Operator at 4%, then the Classic at 2.9%, so almost 3%. And these make up the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guns. Those are the top 7 guns in Valorant. After that, we have quite a steep decline. Like from the Marshal down to the rest of the guns, we have 1.2% or less. Insane. And herein lies the truth. As all of you play Valorant who are watching this, I'm pretty sure, think of how many times have you bought the Ares, right? The Ares is a great example because the Ares makes up the bottom of the Radiant statistics. 0.1% of kills are had with an Ares. That is crazy. The gun is useless, yet economically, it's at 1550, so pretty on par with, of course, the Spectre. I mean, all of us know this. You buy a Spectre, you buy an Ares, if you're gonna force, depending on, of course, how the game is going. Yet, as a counterpart to the Spectre, it has abysmal kill rate, 0.1% versus the Spectre's much higher, 5.4%. I don't even want to do the math. That's like 50 times more, 500 times more? I don't know. Some math guy can tell me in the bottom. Like the reason I'm using the Ares as an example is because it is a gun that fits in the economy space, right? We know at 1550, it matches the Spectre. So in theory, just on an eco level, the Ares is a buyable gun. Okay, that's why I'm starting with the Ares. And it just happens to be the bottom of the statistics, which is just such a perfect example. Yeah, even though it already plays a part of the eco story, it's never bought. Actually, it has such a bad story because it was basically underused, then buffed to a point where everyone was buying it, even over rifles. I don't know if you guys remember the Ares meta. It was scary. It was scary. It was very scary. Still, it only lasted a short period of time before a hotfix came swooping in and made it worse than it was before. And that's it. It was killed. It was shot. That's it. Done. Like, they have never touched it since. And this is something I have to call Riot out on. This is actually terrible balancing. I know no one talks about this. Maybe no one cares, but think about it. The Ares, the only other option to the Spectre on the eco level, is useless. It's not very good. It's never used. And yes, it should be buffed, rebalanced, or reworked in order to bring up the variety, because just as much as maps and agents change the gameplay feeling and fun, so do guns. Yet this is only the start of our story. If you're still watching, I appreciate it, because the next least used gun is the Bucky at 0.2%, and it also has quite the story. Most of you know Shotgun Sage, most of you know the Bucky meta, in which its right click gave it its range, which allowed it to dominate as a eco buy for quite some time. However, that's the problem. It just seems like all the guns in Valorant, all the far-reaching, not very used guns, are either very strong randomly in meta, or Riot doesn't like what they're seeing and they hammer it down too hard to the point where it does not work. And my biggest concern is that once it's hammered down, it's never touched again. Like the Bucky got killed and then Riot just pieced the hell out. Like they didn't even bother realizing that they killed its use case. Or worst of all, they did realize and they're like, yeah, it's okay, because they have this idea of tuning the game to just a few guns. But then I'm gonna argue, what the heck is the point of having all the options? Because statistically you're throwing if you buy them. That doesn't make any sense. And if you don't want to statistically throw, well, here's the sponsor of today's video. It'll help you out. Truth is, I know you're boosted. It's just a fact, but you know what? We can fix it with today's sponsor. sponsor, Valorant Tracker. Oh my, okay, if you haven't heard of it yet, I'll be surprised because this program's a banger. No matter how you play, casually, competitively, etc., it collects all your statistics and puts it in a nice clean little app for you. I can tell that my best map is Breeze with 53 kills and an average KDA of 2.21. Rip, because they're removing Breeze, oh no. But it tells you a ton of things from competitive to unrated to whatever, which I absolutely love. I can check all my stats based off of the agent, sorted by any way I need, and then I can even check out guides based off of my weakest agents built straight into the app, or I can sort all my favorite guns and see how my performance is, or if you don't even want to open the app, you get a nice little clean UI within the game to give overviews of the stats depending on the agents you're going to select or how the game is going under the scoreboard. It is a fantastic application. Check it out for free using the link down below. Of course, I'm not oblivious. Balance is a hard thing to do, right? But the problem is I haven't seen them try, right? They didn't rebuff the Bucky to see if it could fit into a good slot. Instead, they were happier to just never see it played again, which is very hurtful. And then you might be thinking, all right, but the Bucky cost $850. If it's too strong, it's gonna suck. It's gonna be a little bit of a yikes. Well, here's where I'm gonna counter this. The Odin is actually right above the Bucky at 0.3%, yet it costs $3,200. It costs more than a Vandal or Phantom, but objectively speaking, is it better? Now, the Odin is one of the few guns I allow to slip past my thought process and my critique, and the reason for that is because it actually has a unique scenario, right? Wall bangs, spamming areas, it has a more of a control scenario, so buffing it is a little bit dangerous. However, with that being said, the Op also has a unique scenario, and it's its counterpart, right? It even costs more, way more, and it has a 4% use rate, and it just goes to show that the use case of the operator is so much stronger than the Odin. So it does beg the question, do guns need to be tuned, changed, or reworked based off of shifting metas and the overall evolution of the game? After that, we have the Shorty, and I actually think the Shorty is a decent example of a gun with a low use rate, however quite important to the game. It only costs $150, supposed to be the cheapest eco buy that you can have other than the classic, and it has a very specific use case, right? It's supposed to be your sidearm that's used when you need to hold a corner or just get a little bit of a cheesy kill. And for that reason, I actually believe it's quite a balanced gun. I believe it's a use case scenario that needs to remain in the game even if it's rare. And I would argue that for the Odin as well. I'm just more begging questions and bringing up a discussion. But then on the flip side, something like a Frenzy, it's not exactly weak, but is it good if the use case of it is so much further down than the Ghost? The Ghost at 6%, the Sheriff at 4.7%, yet the Frenzy only at 0.8%, right? It's obviously lacking compared to its other sidearm counterparts, but does it have its own unique scenario? Is a Frenzy supposed to be picked over a Shorty, over a Ghost, depending on what you're doing? And I would say this is where the Frenzy lacks. Maybe it should be reworked or tuned up, because I think it could be a much more fun to use gun in a much broader unique scenario. But even with all that, I don't have too much of a problem when it actually comes to the pistols of Valorant. Some tuning or changes I think could be beneficial, but it's nothing compared to the primary guns, the Lost and Forgotten, the Judge, make it too strong and people are gonna be quite upset about it, the Stinger, that was meta briefly, but yet another story of Riot nerfing it to the ground and making sure you never use it again, because if it's just a little too strong, it's very bad for the game apparently. Or the Guardian, one of the guns that I think is fantastic and a gun that I think could actually be fixed just with another reduction in price alongside the Bulldog, which is also a good and balanced gun, but they're just in those price ranges that leave them hanging from the Vandal and Phantom. Now, of course, I'm not some sort of balance expert. I understand that, and I understand playing with the gun selection or economy is very sensitive in a game like Valorant. However, my final closing thoughts is, well, who cares? If it balances the game to change it and change up the meta and make things more versatile and exciting, it's most likely healthy for the game if done right and carefully with eyes peeled and balance changes coming. Again, you can't buff something, have it break, nerf it to the ground, and never touch it again like we've seen Riot do over and over. And you might feel super sensitive about the economy, but I digress. Some of the best changes that came to Valorant was when they added the half, the 50 to the economy, and they changed all the abilities and how much they cost. That was probably one of the biggest patches Valorant has ever received in terms of changing the game. Yet, it was so fun. It was so exciting at the time because things changed, things shifted. We had to relearn some things. And overall it was very well received by the community, and there's nothing to say that Riot can't redo that again with the guns, and personally speaking, I hope they do.